Hey everybody, the coffee is hot and it is a great Monday. Today, we want to talk about the multi-generational workplace and the absolute, I don't know, I'm not going to pull any punches, clusterfuck that we're about to face. um, what is about to happen to us? It is inevitable that we're going to be seeing four and five generations working in the same, well, it's not even the workplace, the same organization. And today I have on a communications expert. His name's Ken Golde. He is an executive coach and author, and he has seen the future and has some ideas about how we might be able to or understand what the problem is, the core problem that's going to be driving some of this miscommunication between generations, and a really interesting, and I love a good what is it called? An anagram, and not an anagram,
Acronym.
acronym.
Yeah.
Acronym. I love a
I
good
love a good
acronym, which he's
acronym. I
got.
do.
So, all right. So, Ken Goldie, welcome to Great Mondays Radio.
Thank you. It's very good to be here. I really appreciate the time we took to make it work out.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for coming on. So, you have been working in the executive coaching space, and you've come up with a model around well, I think the impact is on how people communicate. And then furthermore, you are observing that the way that we're communicating is changing depending on our generation. And so why don't you kind of take us through what you've observed, and let's get right to the heart of what the problem is we're going to be facing, and then we can talk about some ways to solve it.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I don't think the way we're communicating is changing by generation. I think people have for a long time communicated the same way. It's just that new generations are starting to really see that it's not working and starting to look for new ways to communicate that are going to be more humanistically effective. It's easy to look back at the stereotype of the 1960s businessman who was never supposed to show any emotion. But we
Yeah.
know now that they did. They yelled and they screamed and they threw things and they barked at each other. They showed lots of emotion. They were just approaching it from the point of view of, I'm not supposed to be vulnerable. I'm not supposed to be happy. I'm not supposed to show weakness. So instead, they were showing anger and frustration. And all of that was affecting the workplace and has for decades. And new generations of people entering the workplace are just not down for that. They're just not going into work environments where they feel like yelling and screaming and letting bottled up emotions come out any way you want is the way to live their lives. They want to live their lives enjoying their workday where they spend most of their living time. And they're much more interested in figuring out how do we work together in a way where humanistically we feel good and produce from that. And what we're starting to see is when people do that, when they find ways to work together humanistically through their bodies and emotions, that better results come along. So my work has been going to people who are in the workplace and who do own companies, small and large, to say, you think communication is breaking down because old world tropes like writing letters and writing emails and having conversations with people aren't working, that somehow what people are saying to each other isn't landing. And that's where time and money are being lost. And that's not really the cause of it. The cause of it is how people are communicating,
Mm.
how approaching each other, what their relationship is with each other, how they're thinking and feeling about themselves in a situation. Am I nervous, angry, threatened, defensive, aggressive? How is that making the other person feel? And how are those things making a message land or not land? And when you start to train your people to become aware of and intentional about those thoughts and feelings going on
Yeah.
inside and how they're coming out through how they speak and how they act and how their physical body shows up to others, the message lands better and then is acted on more efficiently and the work is done more efficiently and more ideas come out and more success comes along.
So let's just quickly. I want to think about why this has occurred. It's almost like as humans we've realized there's other ways to communicate, and you're like when you see an alternative, you're like, oh, it doesn't have to be that way. Before it was that was the only, like, that's what success looked like. But now we understand that's not necessarily what success has to look like. And further, and it's almost like I don't that I. I don't even need that doesn't need to happen. Not only is there an alternative, but it's just not necessary to talk that way. That's what I think. I mean, that's my observation of why we're moving in this direction, right? It's like we have these younger generations and we're like, I can't believe they're so entitled. But really what they're coming with is a larger perspective around what things could look like and could change. And they're just not gonna put up with it.
I like to think of like Ebenezer Scrooge in A Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
Charles Dickensonian era, old miserly man with no relationships who didn't care about anybody, but he was rich, and everybody in town respected him because he was rich, and at the same time didn't like him because he was miserly and mean. And somehow that stereotype of what being successful in the business world was came from generations before: work ethic, work ethic, work ethic, make money, don't be human. And then somewhere in the early mid 20th century, you started to have early writers start to think and talk. The Zig Ziglars and Paul Myers start to say, wait, there is another way to be in the world. And it's taken 50, 60 years for the stigma of the phrase self-help or personal development to fade into a new generation of people say, well, if you're not going to help yourself, who is going to help you? And if you're not going to develop yourself, what's the point of life? And they're starting to take these concepts of looking inward and having authority over being the person who you are in life, instead of feeling like the person you are in life is somehow automatic or pre-programmed by the circumstances around you, is
Yeah.
what life is all about. And and now we're at a point finally where people are
Willing.
bringing that not only into their personal lives, which has been around for 20, 30, 40 years, but into the workplace, and actually communicating about the practice of being authoritative over who you are in the workplace in order to create better results for you and the people who work with you and for you.
Before we get into the particulars, are there models of business leaders who are thinking and acting like this? Because I fear that when we think about the Steve Jobsians and the Bezoses of the world, right? Like Bezos is exactly that work ethic, work ethic, work ethic, right? And Jobs is was that typical, like I don't have time, I'm gonna yell at you type of thing. Are there models? Because as humans, it's easy for us to enact something when we can see it
Mhm.
and and appreciate it, can envision it, and it's easier to envision if we see it, and that's what success looks like. Do you have any examples of folks that we can start to look to that sort of embody this kind of new way of being a successful leader?
Well, I haven't met them in person. I mean, I couldn't name a Fortune 500 CEO who I've met in person and be able to say, this is somebody who, when I'm around that person in person, who is of enough name value for you to recognize that I could comment on their behaviors, or managers and leaders who are working for them. But I certainly work with many business leaders who do own and run multi-million and multi-tens of million dollar companies that are embodying this kind of practice in their lives and do want to have their employees experience the benefit of enjoying going to work every day and not going to work every day feeling like it's a chore and something that they just have to do to get away from. And when their employees go to work every day feeling like they're appreciated and enjoying the workplace because the people they're working with and for express that to them, those companies, to me, in my experience personally, function much better and succeed more easily. When you mention a Bezos or a Steve Jobs or arguably a Bill Gates or an Elon Musk, these men who are universally kind of tagged as being autocratic and not necessarily pleasant to be around, I do think there's probably an equation in there somewhere that says if you want to be a trillionaire, you may not have time to engage on a personal level with everybody around you. There's just so much going on. I read the Elon Musk biography, and it's very interesting. You have to ask yourself when you get to the end of it, would he have accomplished everything that he accomplished if he weren't somewhere wherever he is on the spectrum and just not able to engage with or really even care that much about
Yeah.
what people's emotional response to him is. Had he done that, would his business have succeeded to the point that they have where they're worth trillions of dollars? Maybe not, but
Yeah.
not everybody in the world wants to be
Yeah.
a trillionaire.
Yeah.
Most people in the world want to run their business, make profit, live a really great lifestyle at whatever level that is, but also feel valued and like you value others as you go through life. And that's the space that I'm working in, not the 10 executives out there who are building the largest companies ever
Yeah.
without
Yeah.
concern
Yeah.
whatsoever about
Well, I
showing life.
think Musk might be undoing whatever good he's created in the world, but we can have that discussion too.
Maybe the biography is fascinating, and I've never met him personally, so I can't say what it's like to be in his presence. But you get a good picture of what it looks like to be someone who is so disconnected from humanistic interaction that he got a lot of tangible benefit out of it, but it's also cost him a lot in
That's
his
right.
personal
That's right.
relationships, a
That's right.
lot. And
Let,
his with women, his
yeah,
children,
yeah.
everything, his
Yeah,
parents.
yeah, it's a trade-off. It's a picture of Dorian Gray for the modern business world. So let me put forth two leaders that I think might fit that mold. One that I did meet, one that I have not met. The first, I think, was kind of the model in the 2010s, which was Tony Hsieh of Zappos. Now, obviously problematic in a lot of different ways. He went a little, he went pretty far out there and eventually died because of that kind of extreme persona. But I think he was trying to get there, and I did have the opportunity to meet him, and he really did care about people. Um, Now that said, when he implemented holacracy, for example, it was like you can choose, I'm doing it, you can choose to stay or not. So I don't know whether that fits into it or not. So that's one, I think that's one just model. Not that it works with your model, but it's like one idea that I have. The second, and I have not met them, is Brian Chesky of Airbnb. Every interview that I've heard, every conversation that I've heard of him and people that have interviewed him have talked to him about being this design forward, empathetic leader. So I just want to put those two out there as possibilities, and I think it's a conversation we're going to continue to be having, and
No.
worthwhile to kind of at least strive to have some images. Okay,
Mhm.
back to you, Ken. So we what we're saying or how we're saying it is problematic in that we need to learn how to communicate better, and we're not able to, what would you call it, self-regulate or be aware of how we're communicating.
Yeah,
So let's
self-regulate's a good word. Awareness and intent is what I usually say.
awareness and intent. So if the problem, so let's address the problem. The problem is that how some people and that are tend to be older try to communicate with folks that are newer in the workforce or younger, um, aren't connecting, they aren't able to communicate. Why is this, and what can we do about it?
I'm going to answer. Let me just clarify a little inner point there.
Please.
The younger people have just as much trouble doing this as the older people. They're just the ones who likely want to see it change more.
Ah,
But
great, great.
there's a humanistic kind of like developmental lack of awareness and intent around physical presence that teens and 20 somethings and Gen X's and Gen Zers also have. They want to see it change. It's the people who've been ingrained in it longer who are less apt to look for a new way because they think they're going to suffer. They think if I go do this, my business will suffer and people will suffer and people won't understand and we'll lose money. And the younger people are like, I don't care if we lose money. We want this to change, but they still need to develop the skills.
Great, great.
Basic
I love
notion
that.
is Basic notion is the FAST way is an acronym, as you mentioned at the beginning. We love acronyms. It stands for feelings, action, speech, and thoughts. And the idea is that how you speak and act is driven by how you think and feel. And people don't often put those two things together. They think how they think and feel is automatic. These are my thoughts. These are my opinions. It's just me. That's how I am. These are my feelings. This thing that happened made me feel this way. And therefore, I must behave in ways that are like consistent with my thoughts and feelings. And if you
Mm.
tell me to behave differently, you're telling me that you're not honoring my thoughts and feelings. And I don't like the sense that you're not honoring my thoughts and feelings. And they get defensive about their thoughts and feelings. We call it our identity, our personality. People get really defensive and have a lot of ownership over their identity, their personality, which is how they're thinking and feeling about themselves and other people and the world and all their ideas and opinions. And how they behave in the world comes from those things. And people want to just say, that's me and do it, even if it's not working. And I look at it from a different perspective. I look at it as if the person you've learned to be in your lifetime is achieving some success through how you think, feel, speak, and act in some arenas, that's great. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But if the person that you've learned to be in your lifetime through the way that you are thinking, feeling, speaking, and acting is not creating success with your colleagues, with your financial life, with your health, with your relationships, with your family, whatever it is, a lot of people want to just say, well, I'm working over here, so I'll work over here too, no matter how much the evidence shows that this way of being isn't going to produce the results that they want in this arena. So I come along and I say, on some level, you created you. You may think life created you and your parents created you and your teachers and clergy and experience and love relationships created you, but they didn't. Those were just experiences that you had that created thoughts and feelings inside you that formed into your personality. And you shaped that subconsciously, but nobody reached into your head and made you be the person who you are in the world. You developed that way through the psychological and emotional interpretations that you had of the events of your life. And if that way of being is not working for you, you do have the authority to say, I want to choose a different way of thinking about myself and other people and whatever situation I'm in and the world, and choose different emotions when the world comes at me. Somebody yells at me. Do I have to get angry and yell back? Or can I remain calm and pursue a conversation? Do I have to get defensive and cower? If I'm the type of person who gets defensive and cowers when somebody yells at me, is the only other option to yell back? Or is there another way? Developing the awareness to say, whatever situation is happening is causing emotions and thoughts in me, but my body doesn't need to react in the way that those emotions and thoughts automatically want to. I have the ability to say, how do I choose to think about this situation or myself in it? How do I choose to feel about this situation and myself in it and other people? And how do I want my physical body to show up in this situation to potentially produce a result that's different than the one that would be produced or has historically been produced when I'm just thinking, feeling, speaking, and acting without awareness or intent at all, and letting that unintentional engine drive me down life, not in a direction that I want to go. That I can take control over how I think, feel, speak, and act, and how I physically show up in my body to
Yeah.
turn and steer that engine wherever I want it to proceed. And when we talk about an organization,
Yeah.
when teams can come together and start talking about ideas, and somebody says, oh, I have this idea, let's do a blue mug with a Asian Japanese symbol on it. Somebody else will go, oh, I hate that idea, and the first person gets defensive, and now they're fighting. But they're not fighting about the idea. They're fighting about being right or wrong or judged, but they
Mm.
don't know they're fighting about being right or wrong or judged. They think they're fighting about the idea. So
Hmm.
how as a leader do you take that situation and go, okay, everybody, somebody likes a blue mug with this symbol on it and somebody doesn't. Let's talk about the blue mug with the symbol on it and the marketplace and the consumer and the cost, and not take it personally that somebody likes or doesn't like your idea and react in ways that put you in miscommunication. That's where the miscommunication is starting.
Mm.
People are reacting emotionally and intellectually in ways to other people and ideas that aren't being productive to conversation. So the fast way is about developing a practice, an actual practice of being able to check in with yourself all the time and say, whatever just happened, this person didn't like my idea. What did that cause me to think and feel? And if those thoughts and feelings are going to produce a response that isn't productive, how can I turn that around and
Yeah.
produce a response that is productive?
So that was going to be my next question, which is how do I start? I mean, in my experience, behavior change starts with that emotional, like if you're able to, the easiest emotional responses are the like the big ones. So if you have, like, you're like, you get an email and you're like cold sweat or fuck you, or like whatever that response is, Is that the moment that if someone's just kind of starting on this and trying to understand, okay, what's the difference between what I'm thinking and feeling and what I'm acting and saying? Is that where one would start? Is that how you work with your clients?
Yeah, so I use three words. I use the words context, content, and container. And I use
Context, content, and container. Okay. Lay it
context is the
out.
word I use for your thoughts and feelings. So think, feel, speak, and act. How you think and feel is your context. And it makes sense. When somebody says to you, let me give you some context around a situation, what they're really saying is, let me tell you how I think and feel about this situation, so I can kind of shape and guide how you think and feel about this situation. That's what context is for. Content is how you express your context. So if you think and feel whatever it is, and those thoughts and feelings come out of you in words and actions, that's the content that your context is producing. And your container is your physical body. Your context also drives your physical body. So if somebody comes into you and says, that was a horrible idea, and your context is, I'm being abused and berated, your body might go, and if somebody comes in you and says, that was a horrible idea, and your context is, wow, I love feedback no matter how it comes, and I'm so open to what this person has to say right now, your body might go, really, tell me why. And some people would say, how can you smile to somebody who's yelling at you? And I'm going to say, because I have a choice over how I'm going to meet this person, no matter how they're bringing themselves at me. So the awareness of context and the choice in it is where it starts. And getting to it in a like a surprise moment clearly takes more practice, but the practice is to do it in not surprising moments. So one I use a lot because everybody in the workforce who has a family and kids feels this. You have a day, whatever it is at work, and it produces whatever it produces inside you: anxiety, frustration, irritation, tiredness, or joy or enthusiasm, or whatever it is. And you go home and you park the car and you go in the house and you haven't taken one moment to say to yourself, what energy from my day am I bringing with me into this house? And how is that showing up in my body? And is the way it's showing up going to produce the effect that I want to affect when I walk into my family or not? And I'm not even talking about, I mean, certainly we can say there's the person who just comes in angry and don't bother me. And we know that person's doing damage to their family, but not even that person. Just imagine the person who's had a long, tired day, comes in with a sigh, opens the door, and you have twins, and I have twins. So you know what it's like to come in the door and have two little 5-year-olds charge you at the same time. And if you don't, it's not one kid, it's two. And if you don't get your balance, they're going to knock you over.
Yep.
So if somebody comes in, even just tired and wanting a moment to themselves, and they come and they go, not now, kids, just give me a minute. That's not barking. That's not yelling. That's not what we would think of as like a traumatic or toxic relationship. But in that one moment that that person takes to set down their bag and go rinse their face and come back and go, okay, I'm ready, that moment's gone. Those kids are on their iPads, the whole charge, the whole hug, it's over and cannot be recreated. So for that person to stop on the way to the door and say, what am I thinking and feeling right now? Tired, I need a break. I'm a little irritated about this thing that happened at work, but I'm going into the house. And the context I want to hold for my 5-year-olds when they run at me is I am ready for you the moment you want to say hi. And develop the ability to say, when I walk in the door, I'm there for that hug. And after that hug, then I'm going to go and rinse my face and take my moment. That produces an extraordinarily different relationship between parent and child for those children's entire lifetime. And that same situation can be said for going into a talk to the board of directors or pitch the bank for a loan or go out on a sales meeting to a client. I use the example often of somebody goes on a sales meeting to a client and they get there and the person they're supposed to pitch doesn't show up and
Yeah.
they're pitching a junior and the junior's got half the amount of time and is on their phone the whole time. And then that person has a terrible meeting and comes back later and the boss says, how'd it go? And the person says, it went terrible because they totally screwed the whole thing up. The guy didn't show, he didn't tell me, the junior wasn't interested, it was a dead deal. And nobody's going to say, hey, what was your context intentionally when you went in? Oh, I meant to be prepared and engaged and professional. Great. And when this happened and this happened and this happened, what did your context become? Oh, became irritated and frustrated and pissed off. Cool. From irritated and frustrated and pissed off, how did you show up in the meeting? So the fast way gives people the opportunity to say, even when things go on that create emotions and thoughts in me that are leading me to be a way that isn't productive, I can check in right there. Oh, the person I'm meeting with isn't available today. Okay, new person's coming. Oh, I'm irritated and pissed off. But irritated and pissed off is not going to get me the result I want. So what am I going to choose to be?
Mm.
That's the process.
Yeah, I mean, you have to make a habit of it, don't you?
It's the practice.
Of like taking a breath. It's almost Buddhist. I don't,
But
I
it's
kind of
what do you do with that breath? A lot of people say take a
uh take a
but
beat.
people don't know what to do with that beat. They think that beat is just take a breath so I calm down a little bit, which is great. But if they're not checking in with what is my context, what am I thinking and feeling, after the breath, they're still going to be thinking and feeling the same thing. So the chances of them getting into the same place they were before the breath are very high. If they take that beat and say, what am I thinking and feeling, and how can I change it? And when they change it and they go into the situation, they now have a
Hmm.
new context guiding them into the situation. And when you multiply that by all the situations that people encounter with each other all day long at work, colleagues, bosses, subordinates, employees, forward facing clients, sales, banks, phone calls, vendors, hundreds of conversations a day, a week, a month, intentionality in your context, content, and container leads you down a path that you control far more, even in the face of surprising events and catastrophes and interruptions and crises, because you're controlling you.
Right. So it's really a shift from this reactionary mindset to a proactive mindset,
100%.
right?
Yeah.
Where it's like you don't have to be upset by the thing that just occurred, which is for me when I learned that concept was like, whoa, that's like a huge, you're like, what do you mean I don't have to be, I can choose not to be upset. You're like,
Mhm.
what? What do you mean? So let's bring it back then to this kind of multi-generational workplace.
Mhm.
So we are now there's two sides of this. There's the two sides of the communication. And what we're trying to do is be able to approach the reality of the situation, or maybe this is how I would frame the question. Is it what you're describing is the result that we're trying to approach the situation in a sort of clear-eyed, here's the reality, as opposed to my emotion sort of clouding the instant of communicate, the email or the Slack or the announcement or something like that. Help me through this.
Well, I think that when you talk multi-generational, I think the first thing everybody needs to do is stop judging each other. You got peoples in their 40s, 50s, and 60s judging Gen Yers and Gen Zers for
Yep.
their whatever it is. They,
Whatever it
they
is.
feel entitled or they don't want to work that hard. I'm just going to keep labeling it, right? They want it easy and they want everything to come to them without working and they're distracted and they're just judging, right? So these young
Hmm.
people are coming into the workforce already under the gun of people who are more experienced, more successful, richer, and more powerful than them,
Hmm.
telling them they're wrong in their entire way of being. And then you've got them looking up, going, "Yeah, but you're autocratic and self-reinforced and egotistical and arrogant and conceited, and you're judging me." Without realizing that in the very way that they're saying you're arrogant and conceited and you're judging me, they're also judging them. So everybody's just saying, I want you to be more like me, and I'm judging you for not being, and creating this big barrier between generations because
Hmm.
both generations want the other generation to be more like them and not opening themselves at all to understanding that the other generation is different and is always going to be different. So if you want to bridge the communication gap between Gen Xers and baby boomers and Gen Yers and Gen Zers, it's got to start with both ends of the spectrum saying, I recognize that this other generation is different and always going to be different. And it's on me to bridge that gap. And when both sides say it's on me to stop judging and bridge that gap, that's
Hmm.
the beginning of a context shift. That's the beginning of Gen Xers and baby boomers saying there is value in these young people coming into the world at a more enlightened, self-aware time. And that could very well bring more success to my business. And there's a shift in context when a Gen Y or a Gen Zer says, I grew up in an era that's different from that person, that person created a lot of success. Even though I feel like they're autocratic and conceited and arrogant, I have got a lot that I could learn from them about business and a lot that I could teach to them about enjoying life more. And
Yeah.
if both sides started to say, I can teach and learn instead of you're wrong, be like me, spread that by 200 million people in the workforce, and we would have a massive shift in how
Mm,
America
mm,
approaches life and
yeah.
work and business and success.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and the thing that I will say that the older generation needs to get is they're the ones on the way out. They're handing over the reins to the Gen Yers and Gen Zers no matter what. So they have an opportunity here to deliver what they've learned in a way that it's received and accepted and taken value from, or just have it abandoned entirely. Because another 30 years from now, all the 20, 30-year-olds now are going to be people running business, and they're going to do it the way they're coming up and either take what older generations have learned to teach them or just throw it out and recreate it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been, I think, the beginning of a very interesting conversation that we're all going to be engaging in. Ken Golde, executive coach and author, his new book, The Fast Way, is coming out early 2025. You can learn more about Ken Golde at Breakthrough Leadership. What's the last?
Training, breakthrough leadership training.
Breakthrough Leadership Training. My handwriting was terrible. BreakthroughLeadershipTraining.com/live the fast way. Ken Goldie, thank you so much for coming on Great Mondays Radio and sharing a little bit of your amazing acronym.
I appreciate you taking the time. I really do. I really love this work, this material. I'm spreading it as far and wide as I can, and I appreciate the opportunity to do that here.
Thanks, Ken.